Hello, everybody. We have a phenomenal guest joining us this episode. His name is Jay DiPietro, and Mr. DiPietro is a transformational coach specifically on healing and post-traumatic stress disorders. He has an incredible story. I heard 3 minutes of it one time and it changed my life. And I thought, David, we have to have him on the podcast to share, because what you have done and how you have healed along your journey is so inspiring to me and to everybody that was in that group. And I would love for you to take a moment and share a little bit about your story with us today. David actually doesn't know anything, so you get a clean slate here today.
Oh, boy. Well, hello,
No
everybody. Good. No pressure on me, all right? It's okay. I got broad shoulders. Where do I start with that? Like, it's where do I start, right? So, my journey's been a long one, and it goes back. I mean, I don't know how old anyone in the room is, but it may even go back before some were even born, right? So I used to work in healthcare, and I started as, well, can I dial it way back?
Yeah. You go back.
Can
You start wherever you want.
Okay,
The one
so
story
look,
I do want David to hear is the emergency room story.
I got married really young. Out of high school, I worked for a family business, and then decided that kind of wasn't for me. I did it for a couple of years and then went to college. I met this girl in college, and the two of us, like a couple of idiots, decided to get married, right? Because that was the thing that we thought that was the right thing to do. We were way too young to do that. So that kind of dissolved, and I was kind of like in the wind, right? Because I went to school for art. She was in school for art. And I was kind of in the wind. And a friend of mine worked at the hospital that like literally was right around the corner from where we lived. And he goes, "Hey, come on, if you want to go back to school, we'll hire you. And you can work nights and then go to school in the day." And I was like, okay, that's kind of a cool idea. So I went to work it was a psych hospital. Mm-hmm. And so there were locked units, and it was pretty hairy there. And so we worked at night. And
Ooh, all the spooky things come out at night, huh?
yeah. And so while I was there working, I went back to school, and I went to school to become an EMT, because I saw what those guys were doing. I interacted with them when they would bring people in the middle of the night, right? So we'd talk and shoot Can I swear?
Yeah, you can do whatever you want.
Okay. We'd shoot the shit for a while, and I gained this interest in it. So I went to school. Once I finished school, I went to work for one of the ambulance companies, and then further.
As an EMT? You went
as an EMT.
Okay.
As an EMT. And so through that, wow, I'm accelerating this story, but that's okay.
All right. Yeah, we'll jump back and forth.
Because I want David to hear that, the part that really kind of counts, right?
Yeah.
So they were advertising, and this was in like 1993, 92, 93-ish. And they were advertising that they wanted to bring EMTs and medics into the emergency room as part of the trauma team. And it's something that they hadn't really done here. And I believe they had done it out on the West Coast, but they never did it here. So there was kind of this trial thing. And so, when I applied for it, interviewed, and to my surprise, I was hired. So I was like, this is awesome, right? And this was like this awesome job. It was a great opportunity. And then I started becoming more interested, and I furthered that. And I kept on seeking out more and more education, right? So I became board certified diving and hyperbaric medical technician.
Whoa.
So, if somebody's diving, they get the bends, I can run the chamber to get them squared away. Or additionally, they use the chambers for a lot of wound healing, especially with the diabetic population because it helps oxygenate the wound, which promotes more healing. So
Like if
just
somebody loses a toe or a foot, they kind of put it in this chamber, and does it just speed
yeah,
it
you
up?
can
Or?
you can put them in a chamber and you can speed that healing process
Wow.
with pressurized oxygen,
Does
right?
it
So
hurt, or is it just a
no,
space? Oh,
no, it's just a space. It's like you can look it up. It's like you
okay.
can look and see what a hyperbaric chamber is.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
there's
Is that like the
they
sleep
come in.
deprivation type things?
No,
Like where
no.
athletes will get inside of them too, the hyperbaric chambers, or are they different?
No, I believe athletes do it too because it helps. It promotes healing.
Yeah. And they'll do it after like long training camps or something for fights. And it
Yeah,
simulates like being up in the
exactly.
mountains almost too for breathing.
Exactly. So like when I went to school in actually in Key Largo, Florida for it,
Whoa.
which was pretty awesome, right? It was like being on vacation, except we were sitting in a classroom.
Yeah.
And when you look out the window, it's like Key Largo, and there's people going on their boats and they're going on the beach, and we're sitting there. We're from like New England, and I'm going, I'd really rather be out there than in here, but I need to be in here, and I don't know what to do. And it's like it was a very cool experience. But one of the things that we did learn by doing that is that we would go in and learn. So this took a turn, but it's okay, right?
Yeah, we can go wherever you want.
So
There are no rules.
you would go in, and if you were treating a patient, they have multi-place chambers, right? So they're bigger. They have some small ones that are just for an individual, like they use them at Mass Eye and Ear in Boston for wound healing, but it's like a single. It's just a tube. If you were really claustrophobic, you'd probably freak out. But they go in there and you get the technician will stay on the outside and run the equipment. The bigger ones, you would go in with the patient so that you can treat the patient.
Oh, wow.
So as the medical tech, you're also taking the dive with the patient.
Wow. Did that offer you
Right.
any kind of healing as well? Like, were you able to enjoy the
You get
benefits?
hyperoxygenated, yeah, and you come out and you feel like $1 million, like you're like Superman after you come out, right?
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's short lived, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It was a great experience, and honestly, at the time, around here, there wasn't anybody really doing that. So you learned a lot. Then there was a lot of different techniques and things that you had to learn to be in a pressurized environment, right? So if you're hanging an IV bag, there's certain things you have to do because you're in a pressurized environment,
Yeah.
right? So all these things that you do on the outside that you give no extra thought to, once you learn how to do it, now you're in this pressurized chamber and you have to take all these additional steps, and if you don't do it right, you're going to screw up and hurt somebody. So yeah, it was a pretty cool experience. Anyway, went through that. Actually, I went through that the winter before the incident in the emergency room. So that was, I had finished that up in February. And honestly, I think, and Stefani, you know some of my story, but I think in February, when I came back from Florida, I had an argument with my brother about something. It was I couldn't even tell you what it was about right now. Like, it was one of those stupid things that you argue about, and then later on, you're like, what was that even all about?
Yeah.
But we were both pretty stubborn, so we weren't talking to each other.
Yeah. Sounds about right. Sounds like family.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Definitely. So, and I put it more on me because I'm the older, so they should know better. But
So you were doing
What do
all
you-
these, you were taking all these courses, you were getting licensed and learning and building up your toolbox to get you more into the medical field, right? So you
yeah,
had
and I was going
EMT.
to, and my next stop was going to be nursing school. Because I was around nurses, I was working with nurses. There were a few male nurses, not a lot. kind of not like there is today, right?
Sure.
There are a lot of them today, but at the time, I mean, I knew a couple guys, they were nurses, and they just said, dude, do it. 2 years. Go to school for 2 years. Come out, you write your own ticket. You can pretty much work anywhere because there aren't really guys doing it. So I was like, okay, it's a great path. And coincidentally, my mom was a nurse
Oh, wow.
for 45 years, a pediatric nurse who worked at the same hospital.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, we worked at,
Was it an easy transition to going from the arts to the medical, or did you maybe you had some growing up around it, or what made you want to go
I
from
grew up
arts?
around it quite a bit, you know what I mean? But the art thing was always something that I did.
Yeah.
So, obscure fact, I would never have graduated high school if it wasn't for art class.
Yeah.
Because my English teacher I had the same English teacher in junior and senior year in high school. And I was a terrible student. I was so bad, like so bad. She made it, but I was always in my art class. I never missed it. My art teachers were fantastic, and we loved to draw and everything. And so she said, she made a deal with the art teacher. She said, when he's supposed to be in English, I'm going to send him to your class, have him do whatever the lessons are that you do there. As long as he shows up and goes, he'll pass, and we'll get him through.
Oh my gosh.
True story. I think they just didn't want to deal with me if I had to stay back.
Fair enough.
Right?
Yeah.
If they had to keep me back, they didn't want to have to deal with me. So
Yeah.
I think that's really the truth.
Yeah.
Now that
Probably.
I think about it. But it was pretty awesome, right?
Yeah. So you go from Key Largo in February. Did you
Key
move
Largo
back?
in February.
Did you move back to New England? I mean, that's where you got your accent,
Yeah,
I guess.
back to Boston, right? Back home. Back to work in the emergency room.
As an
And yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then, all the things, you know what I mean? All the emergency room things that you do.
Chaos.
It's such chaos.
Yeah.
Have you been to an emergency room?
Yeah, my mom was an ER nurse, so we
Oh, was she really?
Yeah. So I heard stories, and that was our dinner time stories. She'd come home and be like, gunshot wound to the head or a knife stabbing. And I mean, I learned so much. I love, like you probably, I learned a lot about
Oh my
anatomy,
God.
and everyone in my family were doctors and nurses and medical and lawyer. We're the black sheep. I say I'm the black sheep in my family, so I can relate to your story already. But for those who don't know, it's just, you are at a 10 for hours, 12 hours straight sometimes if you were on a 12-hour shift, and it's just.
So I did 312s. Mm-hmm. So I would do 2 back to back, have a day off, and then do a third, and then have a couple days off, and then go back into that rotation.
It's a lot. It's a lot on the mental stability,
And so it's people don't. I think people don't realize that, and they talk. We talk a lot about firefighters and police and EMTs out in the field, and how much they see. And never take away from it. I've been there. Like, I get it. I know they see a ton, but the people in the emergency room see every single one of those cases. Right? So if you're an EMT or a paramedic, you might go to a call and it might be terrible, and you might take people to the hospital and you drop them off. But the next thing you do after that might be you transport somebody from, rehab to their doctor's office, right? For a doctor's appointment, wait around and then bring them back. It could be something along those lines. But in the emergency room, it's nonstop. It's constant. Every single trauma, gunshot victim, stabbing, domestic violence, you name it. It's like coming through the door, and it's amazing the ability that human beings have to mess themselves up.
Yeah. And that fight or flight mentality you have to be in for 12 hours, 3 days a week or more. Just, we're going to get into all of this, but how that can eventually wear on the mental health state. But you have a really inspiring story that happened. I mean, I'm sure you have many, but there's one in particular I'd love for you to share
Yeah.
if you feel comfortable.
It's 100%.
Okay.
100%. And the interesting thing about me telling this story now is that, I mean, I could get into it a little bit, but
Let's do it. Let's get into
for
it.
about 25 years, I never told it to anybody. You know, some people knew, and I just never talked about it. I like you. Well, let's get into it.
Yeah.
So,
Tell me about it. Tell me about that night at the hospital. What happened?
so it's daytime, middle of the day. It was day shift, right? So so the way we would work would be, if you went into our emergency room, right, you go in these middle doors. If you went to the right, there was a walk-in clinic. If you went to the left, that was the emergency room, and it was connected. The waiting room was in the middle, and then triage and everything was like right there in the middle. We would work a couple of shifts in the walk-in. I was working in the walk-in that day, right? So I'm in the walk-in, and it was pretty quiet. We would hang out. We would like, I mean, it was 1997, so we didn't have the internet, and nobody had cell phones, and we didn't have all these things that we have, right? So we had to entertain ourselves if there was nothing else to do, right? So we'd just be screwing around, joking around, and doing like ridiculous things.
Breaking all the HR rules.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Hospital people,
Yeah.
they're the worst. They really are.
Best and the best. Yeah.
They're the best and the worst at the same time. It's a double-edged sword. So it was probably like, I want to say it was probably around 11:30 or 12, maybe around noontime. It was definitely lunchtime in that space. And I got a call from my brother, who I hadn't been talking to because we had this ridiculous argument like in February. Now it's June. And he's asking me to help this guy that worked for him. And the guy was having a problem with some people that I knew. My brother didn't know, but he knew that I knew them. And his problem was that he was messing around with somebody's wife.
Oh no.
They found out about it. They were calling him that, you know, he was going to have a problem on his hands, right? So, and my best advice to him was that it's none of your business. You know what I mean? And he had his own business, right? So my brother had his own business. This kid was working for him. This guy was working for him. And, my brother, he was married. He had 2 kids. His wife was pregnant. And it was like, stay out of it. It's none of your business. He made his mistake, right? Let him figure it out. Yeah, but this. And then someone came to the desk, and I believe it was a doctor, and he asked me a question. So I told my brother, I said, hey, let me put you on hold for a second. I got to answer a question. So I put him on hold. I talked to the doctor. Literally, it was under a minute. He got pissed and hung up. So I don't know where he even called me from. It must have been a payphone.
Yeah.
That was the last conversation I had with my brother. Right. So I went back to doing whatever we were doing, and the emergency room was like, the place was on fire. It was so much going on over there. So this was probably about an hour and a half or 2 hours later. The nurse manager came over and asked me if I was busy there, and I said no. She goes, we need you over here. So we have a gunshot victim en route. So okay, I'm going, right? So we go over and we set up the room. Everyone has a job. You know what your role is. It's subject to change. I mean, based on the circumstances or all kinds. It's always subject to change, but basically what your job is going to be going into it. So they wheel this guy in, and the medics are doing CPR. This guy standing up on the side of the gurney and he's doing chest compressions, and guy's intubated. The other one's running the bag. Somebody's pushing them in. So we wheel them into our room, into the trauma room. So we transfer the patient from their stretcher onto our trauma table. I take over chest compressions from the guy doing chest compressions. Right?
Is this just like a normal CPR?
Normal
Pressing on the
CPR,
chest.
chest compressions, right? And by that time, everybody's in the room. X-rays in the room, doctors are in the room, nurses are in the room. You get. I believe there was an anesthesiologist, because a lot of times they'll come down if they think they need to be there to intubate somebody because they're the pros at it. Just a ton of people. Police were there. So I'm doing chest compressions. I'm just doing chest compressions, and typically, I'm not looking at somebody to try to figure out who you are. It's like, I just know that there's a life here that that I'm trying to save. And reality is, we know that if you're in that situation and you're coming in and we're doing chest compressions, the outcome's probably pretty dismal. But you try anyway, especially when they're young. Right, so young people, there's a far greater chance for them to survive something like that than older folks like me. Right? Although I'm the youngest 60-year-old you're ever going to meet. And that's a fact.
I can vouch for you.
All right, cool. So anyway, we're doing this thing, and I'm doing the chest compressions, and I'm looking down and I'm thinking to myself, something in the back of my head is just going, why are you so familiar? Like, this dude is really familiar to me. And I keep thinking that, and I'm doing my job. Everyone's doing their job. And there was a couple of moments there where the doctors, who was like Steve Coley, is long-haired guy, ponytail, surfer type of guy, right? And he, cool, great emergency room doctor, fantastic. He says, hold up for a minute. So I stop, and he's looking to see on the monitor if there's any heartbeat or if there's anything going on there, and there's still nothing. And he takes a look, and he lifts up, he had a trauma pad in the middle of his chest because he gets shot directly in the middle of the chest. So, and he looks, and he looks at the wound, and he's like, okay, roll him up. Because he wanted to see if there was an exit wound. And he rolled him up, and sure enough, there's an exit wound right in his back. He lost a ton of blood. And by that time, they had started pushing blood, pushing fluids. I mean, we were really doing everything. And so we rolled him back down. He says, okay, go ahead. So I'm doing chest compressions again. And they decided to do an emergency thoracotomy. And do you know what that is?
I do, but I don't know if our listeners will. So maybe you could describe what that is.
Okay, so an emergency thoracotomy is open heart massage. We call it cracking a chest. Mm-hmm. So basically, on the left side of your rib cage, it's like between the third and fourth rib, the intercostal space. They make a big incision. They have a rib spreader that goes in. It kind of looks like a mini Jaws of Life, right?
Yeah.
Spreads the ribs open so you can expose, the chest cavity. And the first thing you're going to see is going to be the lung, and then you move the lung to the side, and then the heart is right there. Your heart is right there. And I've done this a few times in the emergency room, actually done the open heart massage. So it wasn't a new thing, right? Mm-hmm. So, and they have a kit, and they bring the kit out, and he starts doing the procedure, and you still have to do chest compressions during the procedure, right? Because you've got to try to keep whatever that blood flow is going through the blood and oxygen through the body. So he starts cutting, and it starts going, and I'm looking, and if you've ever been in the emergency room, when you go into the emergency room, there's going to be people at registration taking your information, So one of those ladies walked in the room and asked, does anybody have an ID? Or did anyone find an ID? Well, all his clothes were cut off of him in the field, right? So whatever he had with him was probably laying in the parking lot where they picked him up. But honestly, it was unbelievable. The words just fell out of my mouth. Literally just fell out of my mouth. You know, name, date of birth, address. And the last thing I said was, this is my brother. And honestly, God, with all the equipment and all the people and everything going on, you could have heard a pin drop and hit the floor, and everyone's looking at me. And Steve Cole had turned and he looked at me, and he looked me right in the eye, and he goes, "Are you serious?" I said, "Yeah, that's my brother." And I can't even tell you what that measure of time is, because it was like a total standstill, but at the same time, everything was going so fast, the thoughts racing through my head, like it just was crazy. And there was a couple guys that dragged me out of the room. So they pulled me out of the room and brought me to this little family room that was like, literally, it was like right next to the trauma room. So I'm sitting in there, and at that point, there were two cops that were there because there was a shooting, all right? So this is a shooting victim. So there was a detective and another cop that was there. They came like into the room to talk to me. And I'm like, I don't even know what to tell you guys, because I like, talk about having your mind blown. Yeah. So, I know that because it was me and because I worked there, they took additional steps that they really didn't need to or didn't have to. And in retrospect, looking back, like, I know they didn't have to do that. So they took him to the OR after the fact. I mean, normally you would have called that right there in the emergency room. They took him to the OR and really went above and beyond and tried to save him. But it was, his injury from one gunshot to the chest was so extensive that, he didn't have a chance.
He was kind of DOA.
For the most part, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the most part.
Man. Did you have the chance? Because I think in your story you had said, like, were you doing the heart compressions? Had you gotten your hands?
I did not get that far. But we were there. I mean, we were literally right there. And I'm pretty sure, I'm not pretty sure, I'm positive. I know the next step is he would have looked at me and said, "You want to do this?" And I absolutely would have.
Right. And you would have done it till, you still would be doing it to this day, probably.
Yeah.
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 Or, I mean, I would have done it until someone stopped me. Because that was just what you did. But so that was that incident, and there were a lot of things involved there. Like my youngest brother was in the Navy. And we're in Boston. He was in Groton, Connecticut at the sub base down there. And he was going through school he was already a corpsman. He was at the sub base going through school to be an independent duty corpsman, which is kind of the military equivalent of a physician's assistant. And so he was in school there. My parents had left the day before or 2 days before that on this trip that they had planned for, I don't even know how long, out to Colorado to stay with some friends, and they were going to travel around Colorado and see the Midwest and the Rocky Mountains. And the only family left here was basically, it was my brother, his wife, his two little kids, and my grandmother, who I lived with actually at the time. So I'm going, how the fuck am I going to get a hold of all these people? You don't have cell phones, right? So you don't have a cell phone. So I ended up getting a hold of an uncle, one of my uncles, and he came to the hospital, right? So then we figured out how to get a hold of people, and I ended up getting a hold of. So let me back up a little bit, right? So in order to get a hold of my brother, I had to call the Red Cross. And there's a whole procedure and a system that they use to get, if someone has a family emergency and they're on active duty, there's a whole procedure to get a message to them. So I had to call the Red Cross and explain to the Red Cross what was going on and get them to contact my brother. So they do that. I'm still in the hospital at this time. Like, I'm still there. Like, my brother is still, he's in the OR. I've been in this room with these cops that are asking me questions that I can't answer and trying to call, like, family to try to get a hold of someone. So I guess the Red Cross finally got a hold of my brother. My brother calls the hospital, and they put the call through to the family room for me to talk to him, and he doesn't. And so I explain it to him, and he doesn't believe me. He thinks I'm full of shit, and I'm like, somebody else fucking talk to this kid. Mm-hmm. So someone else talked to him, and so he did what he had to do to try to get home. We ended up calling. I got the phone number from my parents' friends out in Colorado. And I called, and I was able to get a hold of one of them. My parents were up on Pikes Peak on it was either a hike or it was whatever it was. A freaking park ranger went out into the woods and found them.
Wow. And
brought them back down to where there was a phone. And I'll never forget this. Like, my mother called. She called the hospital. And she ended up talking to me and, like, what was going on? What's the emergency? And I tried to get them to come home without actually telling them what had happened. But she knew. I just told her, I said, there was an accident with Bob and he's in the hospital. You guys, I need you to come home. And my mother, I mean, you call it whatever, mother's intuition, I guess, right? And she knew. She knew that he was gone. So they flew home. My sister-in-law, we got a hold of her, and she came down. It's like, that was June. Nick was born in September, so she was pregnant. She was pretty freaking pregnant.
Yeah.
With the two girls, and they were both little, both under 10. And they came in, and it was like, sucked.
Yeah.
That sucked, So I spent, anyway, the guy that did it, they arrested him. That's a whole nother story. He got sentenced to 2 years.
2 years?
2 freaking years.
2 years for sure. And this wasn't the husband of the guy, of his friend or whatever, right?
No, so initially,
was that related at all to that?
Initially, I thought this is what happened. I thought that
he got involved.
Somebody else my brother got involved. This dude shot my brother because no one was telling me who did it.
Yeah, but somebody knew. There were witnesses, obviously, or did they just?
No witness. There was no witness. He stayed there. So he got shot at a restaurant outside in the parking lot.
Did he know the guy who shot him, or just a drive-by?
Yeah, it was the kid that worked for him.
Why did he shoot him?
It was the guy who worked for him. So we never got a straight answer on that. Like, even in court, they gave him a plea bargain. So he pled guilty to involuntary manslaughter, and he got 2 years.
2 years for killing
2
somebody.
freaking years. And so 2 years. So, yeah, 2 years. My cousin was a sergeant at at the prison. And my cousin goes, "Don't worry about it. He's not going to make it 2 months." And so what ended up happening was they moved him out of Massachusetts to Texas. And he did the 2 years in Texas, and the guy came back, and then he got in more trouble, and he went to jail again. And he passed away, like, I want to say it was probably like 10 years ago that he passed away.
Like he had justice, or were you kind of hoping that he'd live eternity suffering? I mean, what goes, I don't know what that mindset is like. And I know everybody's different. Some people take the forgiveness route. Some people take the, I'm going to.
Look, I had to take the forgiveness route for my own self, right? Because initially I didn't. Initially, I as soon as I found out like what happened, and then I heard the stories, right? And I heard 3 different versions of how it happened. And all 3 different versions, none of them coincided with the evidence or the fact that I saw my brother. I saw his injuries. And I know that there's no way that, like he said, I think the first story this guy told was that he dropped the gun and it went off. And it would have had to be like the magic bullet that got JFK, right? Because it would have had to go straight up and then take like a sharp left and go perfectly horizontally through the center of my brother's chest, right? So I'm like, yeah, I'm not okay with that. And then there was like 2 other stories. And after the first time, like, it didn't matter to me what you said, because you couldn't be honest right out of the gate.
Yeah. So at that point, he loses all credibility.
Yeah. I mean, and it was just about saving his own ass. You know, and we're human, I guess. So we're just human beings, and we do, whatever. Self-preservation kicks in, I guess.
Did your cousin make his life a living hell those 2 months that he was there?
He wasn't even there 2 months. He was there a couple of weeks. I don't think he got the chance to.
Yeah. But if he had, would he have? Was that the intention?
100%.
Yeah.
100%, because that cousin, they were the same age. Him and my brother were they were the same age. So they grew up together. Wow. So there was like, yeah, okay.
I got you. Hold my beer. How old
I want to have a question here.
Yeah.
What's the justification for involuntary manslaughter when he's the one who pulled the trigger on the gun? How did that play out exactly for that?
So kind of the way I think that played out was that there was no witness to it. So there's only 2 people that knew what happened right there, and one of them was dead.
Yeah.
Right. So he could tell really basically any story about how it happened. Do I think that? So if you asked me if I think that he shot him intentionally, I will tell you I don't think that he shot him intentionally, right? I don't believe that.
Exactly.
I believe that was probably accidental.
I think it was like a threatening position and he accidentally fired it type thing.
So my brother, I don't let my family know this, but I have all the police reports and all the stuff, and I have the autopsy report and all of it. And he was shot from between 8 and 12 inches away.
Oh,
so there was a scuffle maybe for the gun.
So my brother may have tried to take the gun from him, because he may have gotten the gun, and it was in his truck.
Yeah.
So the gun was in his truck. He went out to the truck to get the gun. At least that part of it, I do believe. And then what happened after that, we're not really sure, because, like I said, one of them's dead, the other one's not going to say, and now they're both dead. So who's?
Yeah, that makes sense. Like a scuffle where they're each reaching for it.
But it could have been a scuffle, so I go to this. If you have a problem with someone and you go to get a firearm to solve that problem, to me, it doesn't matter who gets shot. You still, absolutely responsible and it's absolutely intentional. Like you intended to use that weapon to hurt someone, and you did.
And it was premeditated. He walked out to get it, whether it was to inflict little fear or whatever it was. He used
Right.
it at that point.
Right, exactly. So that's where I stood on it. I mean, my sister-in-law took a different, she took a different position as, and I don't know if she probably had to do that for her own sanity.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, and she said it's an accident, and accidents happen, and if that's what gets you through it, I get that.
Sure.
I understand.
But she wasn't holding his heart in her hand. Doing chest compressions, you have a different perspective around it, and
So
I'm sure that took extra healing. You were in the trenches with him.
100%. And so the rest of that story is that I spent another year working in the emergency room, and I had done that same thing at least 2 more times after that, and I had done it prior to that. I don't know, a lot of times. I mean, we're a level 1 trauma center in the city of Salem, Mass. Which is funny. We're talking about this. It's October.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy over there right now. If you've never seen it, it's interesting. It's an interesting take for those of us who have to live near it. Not so much, but yeah. So that was.
You beeping? No.
That's fun.
Oh, okay.
I think that's my phone beeping.
Oh, okay, that's all right. You could silence it if you want. So you went from.
I did want to follow up on that because you said you've had other people in the emergency room since then, like you had to go through. Before your brother and this incident, were they more of just, I don't know, were they always super humanized to you where that is somebody else's brother? Or did that really change your perspective?
No.
100% for everyone who came through?
It was always this real level of professional detachment.
Mm-hmm.
So you really people say, it's funny because I've had this question like 4 times in the past week.
Really?
Because I haven't talked about this, I didn't talk about this for so long. And now that I am, people are starting to ask, right? So they're starting to ask these questions. And so it's like, how did you not know that was your brother? And I'm like, okay, so because you have a job, right?
Of course.
You just have your job to do, and that's what you focus on. You're not focusing on the who, right? So it was never really that way. What happened in the aftermath of that was that all of that, everything I did, became personalized.
That's kind of what I thought, yeah.
Right? So every single incident, and it didn't even matter. It could have been as, benign as you sliced your finger open and you need like 3 stitches. I would be taking that personal. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so.
That's somebody's baby. That's somebody's brother. Now you know what they're going through type thing, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, everybody's, you like to say that everybody's emergency is an emergency to them.
Yeah.
Right. So not everything that comes in the door to an emergency room is truly, an emergency. And all of a sudden, so I made there was a shift, right? So initially there was that, everything became really personal. And then there was a shift where I got really cold. Like more than like professional detachment. Like at the point where I was totally numb and like, yeah, you could have come in with your fingers amputated. I would probably hand you a towel and go, yeah, sit down and suck it up for a minute.
Yeah.
And not acknowledge that So I went to these two extremes, and it wasn't until it was probably really literally 12 months later, June of 1998, when that it really just kind of caught up with me, and I wasn't sleeping and I wasn't doing anything, and so I ended up going to employee health and saying, you know what, I'm having a problem. And people had already recognized it, like that I worked with. Other people that I worked with had recognized that. Nobody was really, the funny thing is that, here's a really odd fact, is that no one that was there ever spoke to me about that incident.
They purposely kept it.
Because I know now, because I'm still friends with a couple of people that were actually there, that I worked with, and they never talked to me until recently about it. And so we had these talks, and they were like, the entire place was freaked out.
I bet.
Because if it could happen to you, it could happen to them. And it's not something anyone ever really considered.
Do you think it helped that nobody talked about it, or do you think it hurt looking back now? Would it have been better if people held space and let you talk, or were you just not in the space to even discuss it?
It's hard for me to say where I was then. I mean, I talked about this the other night with a couple of people, and I said that I had become so angry at what had happened that not just that, I lost my brother and that I was part of that, but that the guy who did it is like gets 2 years, and he gets to come out and live his life, and his wife is waiting for him, and you know what I mean, his family's there, and it's all good. I was angry at a level that I had never experienced before or since. Right? I never ever want to feel like that. Mm-hmm. But that anger drove me for a few years at least.
Yeah.
But we talked about that, and I said that, and they said, yeah, people would look at you at work, and just the way you walked around, you were like a caged animal.
It's wild how that happens, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm like,
you don't know how you're going to be. You don't know how you're going to act or what you're going to say. And Dave and I were watching, what's that show with the Menendez brothers?
Oh, yeah.
It's Monsters, the story of the Menendez brothers.
Have you watched the Menendez brothers show yet?
No, but I remember when that all happened.
Yeah. So we're sitting here talking like, okay, we have a baby on the way, and if these were our children and something happened, or somebody, like if somebody, molested our kid, I know it's morbid to say, but I asked him, like, what would you do? What would you do? Because I would be in jail. I would not let it get to the justice system because of stories like yours where you see it doesn't feel like you get justice. If people molested my child, I would be in prison, and I would have that anger rate. I don't know if I could take the forgiveness route. I would want revenge.
Okay, so if I'm being completely honest, and I'm going to be.
Yeah, please.
That anger drove me, and when I was working in the emergency room, I was taking care of myself, healthy, right? Going to the gym, but not hardcore or anything, right? Not working hard at much, just kind of going through the motions, something to do, right? Stay in shape. After that, I was like, my goal was I was turning into a machine. Mm-hmm. And if that kid when he came out, I was just going to put him down.
Right. How do you not think that? I know that's horrible. How do you not go there?
It's horrible. But that drove me to this place where I would go to work. I would work the days that I had to work. I would go to work. I'd come home from work. I wasn't sleeping. Like if I was sleeping an hour or two a night that was saying something.
Were you taking medication at all to help you sleep, or were you?
No,
You were
I
just.
did. Yeah, it was like, so I would get up in the middle of the night, and I lived pretty close to the beach. The beach was about a half a mile from my house. So I would go out the door, I would run, and I would run the beach, and I would do a 7-mile loop in the middle of the night. Rain or
Some of
shine,
that
didn't matter,
energy out.
right? And then I would go home, and I would be able to probably rest for a while. And then I'd get up, and then I'd go to work. And on the days I had off, I was doing the same thing, but on my days off, I would run at night. I would go to the gym the minute they opened, 5 a.m. I'd spend a couple hours in the gym. I'd come home, I'd shower, I'd get my dog, and I'd go hike 7-8 miles with the dog. And then I'd come back and I would continuously repeat that cycle.
Was it like
And
a
my
sabotage, or no, go ahead.
My thought process at the time, and I've thought about this a lot, was that bottom line is, I think I'm going to go kill this kid, but I'm not going to just stand there and wait for them to come take me away. I'm running. And I know because I had great friends that were cops, and I knew tons of them from working in the Marines. I know I'm going to lose, but I'm not going to lose because I sat there and waited for him. Right?
Yeah.
And I knew that the level of shape, my fitness level, they were going to be fucking challenged to catch me. There was no fucking way. They were not going to, it was going to be a challenge.
Come and get me, baby.
Huge challenge.
Yeah.
So,
It's hilarious.
like,
It's terrible, but it's also hilarious. You know that
it is.
you were
totally
training. You were training to outrun the cops.
I was training to take someone's life and then outrun the cops.
Yeah.
I 100%. That was what I was training to do.
Yeah. And then and fast forward, I mean, no judgment, because I feel like I would be plotting. So, like, I would have a whole plan. You know, and again, you don't know what you do in those situations. I would like to think
Yeah, I
I
had a
could
plan.
be peaceful, but if someone came after my family, we're a big Italian family. Like, you just don't mess with any of us. You don't mess with us. If you mess with one, you mess with all. And it's not pretty. And I don't mean that as a threat. It's just in our blood. I don't know what it is. It's like this weird animalistic, like,
yeah.
and we just don't sit. Like, we don't wait. You know, I don't know. And David, my husband's family is the same way. Like, you just, if we sit, we're plotting. Oh,
You both Italian?
His family's Spanish.
Yeah, Spanish,
Irish.
Mom's side's German and Irish, but Spanish on the dad's side.
His dad is spicy. Man, his dad's
Yeah,
spicy.
you got that whole spicy thing. So,
He does.
my dad is. He likes to say he's all Italian, but that's bullshit because my grandmother was from Ireland off the boat, like 100% Irish, right? His mother, so yeah, okay, dude.
Well, they call the Sicilian, they call us Black Irish because a lot of the Irish migrated to southern Italy.
Right. So
we're more of that.
So my Italian side is Sicilian,
Same.
right? So
Yeah.
and so when I tell you that, like, my cousin was like, "Don't worry about it."
I get it. I
It was
understand what that means.
Don't worry about it. It's like there ain't gonna be no worries.
Yeah. Which is terrible in a way, like an eye for an eye, a cheek for cheek.
You want more terrible? I'll give you more terrible.
Yeah, I love it.
My dad worked for the town, and he ran the cemetery. He was in charge of the cemetery, which is literally I'm pointing right down the street. It's literally right there.
You had a plan.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole nother sad part of the story because my brother was buried like about 40 feet from his office window.
Mm.
And so he got to see that every day until he retired, right? Which sucked, but it is what it is. And, my mom still goes pretty much every day
Wow.
to the cemetery.
Wow. Good mama right there. Yeah.
Yeah.
That doesn't ever go away, I'm assuming. I mean, I would think that pain of losing a child or a brother
Yeah.
leaves a
Well,
void. Like, what do you do with that void? And I know I know there's more to your story too. I'd like for you to get into because it did lead you to,
it
our
did leave.
podcast is called Shifting Focus, and you had a huge shift in your focus
I
in your
did.
life. And so, if you feel comfortable sharing that as well, I'd
Well,
like to open it up for you.
I'll share all of it with you.
Okay.
I'm gonna give it all to you. Like I'm gonna put it all on the table. You guys
Is
can
it?
do what you want with it.
We're gonna sell it. Just kidding.
Well, if you sell it,
Not gonna
can you help me out a little bit? I mean, I don't need a lot. I don't require much.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to know what got you to this point of peace, because carrying around that anger and that hole in your
So,
heart, and,
in 1998, when I was still at the hospital, right, and I wasn't sleeping, I was going through this thing and everything. I went to employee health, and I explained it to them, and so employee health was connected to the walk-in clinic where I worked, like one day a week. Right. So we worked together with them as well. And they saw this progression with me. And so I went and talked to them, and they said, you know what, let's get you somebody to talk to. Now I'm almost a year later, right? So they sent me to talk to somebody, and they just didn't even. So this was the very first therapist I saw. And we went in, and I don't know if you've ever been to therapy or not. Most people have at this point, right?
yeah.
The first time you go in and they do all this sort of intake stuff, and they talk to you a little bit, and you don't really dive in.
Mm-hmm.
So the next time I went, that first time they did that. Then the next time I went, we kind of dove in, and I told her the story of what happened, and the tears welled up in her eyes. And I was like, right out of the gate, I was like, I shut right down. I was like, I'm good. Because you can't handle listening to the story. You're not going to be able to handle what's like going on in here. Mm-hmm. And I walked away from that. They ended up sending me to some independent psychiatrist way in the city. And he talked to me for a couple hours and made his report and sent it back to the hospital and told them, like, I still have that. That was my diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. Mm-hmm. He told them in no uncertain terms, you absolutely need to get him some help because he's like so far out on the edge. Because I told him everything. Like, I told him the whole deal. Like, listen to it. I'm going to train and I'm going to kill this dude.
I mean, we can laugh about it now, but I'm sure then when you hear that from professional help, you're like, okay, this is serious.
Yeah.
He's not messing around.
So I was also really careful because I worked in healthcare.
Sure.
I was careful to dance around things that I knew were going to be real red flags.
Yeah.
Right? Because the last thing I wanted to do was to get locked up in that very first psych hospital where I worked.
Because you've been there too. You know what that looks like.
I know. I'm like, you ain't putting me in there. There's no way. No chance. That's not happening.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
If I want to go there, I'll go sit in the mall and eat purple crayons or something.
Yeah. Might as well just strap me to my bed right now. Leave me in my own space. Yeah.
So that was that, and then we ended up parting ways, me and the hospital, because it was obvious that I wasn't going to be able to continue to do that. So we worked out, and this took a little time because I had to get they hooked me up with like this person that does career counseling and figuring out like, how can we help you to shift careers because you can't be here anymore. Like, this is not healthy for you anymore. This
probably
this
puts
environment
patients' lives at risk too, because you're,
Yeah,
you're
oh,
not in
yeah.
the right mindset.
No, because look at
The loss of
the last
empathy.
thing, really, the last thing I would have wanted to do is make a mistake that cost somebody their life or a limb or an eye or anything. You know what I mean? Like, I
Sure,
didn't
yeah.
want to, I wouldn't want to be that guy, except for that one person.
Please come in my hospital. Please come here. A little extra morphine. Night, night.
Yeah, man, no, that's too peaceful.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, you need to amputate all your body parts one by one. Sorry. Yeah,
You really are Sicilian.
I know. Yeah.
So they did that. We did that, and we decided on. That took about a year, and so in 1999 it was towards the end of '99. I went back to school for art again, for graphic design, and so I did that, which was cool. That was cool. That was a good transition. It's something that I still do now. But I did not stop working out. And that led me to so I had studied martial arts for a long time, and then I stopped. And then I wasn't working. I didn't work for like a year. I was on unemployment. They laid me off so I could collect, and then we could figure out where they were going to put me. Mm-hmm. I was in the gym every day, and I ran into one of my karate instructors, and he kind of coaxed me into going back. And so I went back, and I was like, yeah, you know what? That's a really good idea, because I got this little plan in the back of my head, right? Because that's all still going on, right? That's all still happening. Mm-hmm. And interestingly enough, at the same time, and I don't know if you guys will remember, do you remember the Tybo infomercials?
Yeah.
Do you?
Blanks. What's his name?
Billy
Billy
Blanks.
Blanks. Billy Blanks. I did all of those.
Okay.
I lived on
Did you?
Tybo videos. Yeah, I loved them.
Did you?
Double
Yeah?
time.
I met Billy.
Double
Blanks.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah? Did you meet him?
Billy?
I met him. Yeah. We were doing video
That's-
stuff for big fitness conventions, and he was there once.
That's pretty awesome. I'm in the videos.
I was like, "That's
Oh, get
Tybo."
out of here! I'll have to go back and watch
100%.
now. Yeah.
So in 1999, you couldn't turn a television on without seeing his infomercial.
Yeah.
And it was like a 30-minute infomercial. It was unbelievable. And I think they grossed like $1.2 billion.
Oh, I bet.
But so he used to live in Rockland in Massachusetts, and he had a school in Weymouth. So we knew a ton of the same people, and my karate instructor used to compete against him, and he knew him. So we would fly back and forth out to LA to his school and train with him and come back here, and we taught class here, and we taught Tybo, and we did all that. I ended up being in the videos, and I know them pretty well. So that's an interesting twist.
I know, it is kind of cool. I didn't know that part. And just for sake of time too, because I want to make sure we there's a lot I want to cover on your podcast, and I think I only have like 30 minutes left.
Okay.
Can you fast forward to, or cliff note it to what got you to that shifting focus point?
Sure.
And this might be leading into it, but I just want to make sure I cover all your points too.
I spent the better part of, from like 1998, 99, the better part of that time from there to 2021 to the pandemic, right? Just kind of trying to deal with this whole thing on my own. And I had described this more recently. I had described what I was experiencing as it's like a movie. and it's in your mind's eye, right? And it's playing nonstop. It's on a loop, and it just keeps going around, keeps going around. And I called it in therapy, because I ended up going back to therapy after the pandemic, right? So I was in a 10-year, about an 8-year relationship that ended. I was with a woman that had a son, and when I met him, he was 8. And for the next 8 years, I was the guy in his life. His dad was around. His dad was a young guy, a little younger than me. He's in his 50s. He ended up catching COVID, and he died from COVID. He was 53. The day after he died, my better half, and so shall remain nameless, looked at me in the kitchen and said, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, huh? And I was like, you know what? I'm going to just let that roll, because I know you've never been through this, right? Because this is somebody that's really close, right? It's you. And the kid was a disaster. He was 16. His dad just died. He was a mess. So what ended up happening is we ended up breaking up. We split up, right? And I think that the isolation from the pandemic, and that, at the time I was kind of like, even before he died and that happened, I was hanging on by a thread, like my mental health with the whole thing. And I described that imagery that I would see in my head as the traumatic instant replay experience. And it's a great acronym because it's TIRE, and the TIRE just keeps going around and around. And I said that to my therapist, and she's like shaking her head going, "What is wrong with you?" I'm like, I don't know. It's the only way I could. It's like that creative side of me is like, I'm just telling you, this is what I'm experiencing. And she's like, "You're in a constant state of flashback." But that image that I'm seeing, that film, is that day in the emergency room, right? It's me doing chest compressions, and they're cutting my brother's chest open, and it's me realizing that this is my younger brother. He was in the middle. Bobby was in the middle. David's the youngest. So what happened after that is I was done. It was like the post-traumatic stress was more than I could like handle. Because it's like you take all these things in your life, and you pack them in this trunk, and you put this trunk in the attic. It's like all your old things, and you put them in the attic, and you pack them in this trunk. And then one day you've got to pack something else into that trunk, but it's too full and nothing else will fit, and everything comes spilling out, right? So that's kind of what happened with me with that breakup. Like, it was probably one of the most horrible things that happened to me, and probably one of the best things that ever happened to me, right? Because it sent me on this path to where I couldn't deal with it anymore. And I've talked to a lot of people about this, and we talk about how we lose 22 veterans a day to suicide because of PTSD, and people that have never felt that way don't understand it, and they don't. And so I try to explain it like, you will literally do anything to make that stop, because it affects absolutely everything, every part of your life. It affects every part of your life.
Is it just
and
like
that's what it did with me.
All day long, every day, just like a steady video just playing in your mind all day long? Or just when things got quiet, or like what would trigger that for you?
Not being distracted from it. Right? So I literally I haven't stopped to count, but I want to say I probably held 8 jobs in 25 years. And at looking back at that, you look and go, yeah, okay, so you start a new job, right? It's something you've got to learn processes and procedures and things. And so you're occupied. and then you're meeting new people, and you're establishing these new relationships, and your mind is occupied with things until it becomes a routine, and then your mind's not so occupied anymore. And then this thing starts grinding, and it starts grinding, and you can't make it stop. There's nothing that you can do to make it stop. So like I say, you would you would do anything to make that stop. Mm-hmm. So I had gotten to that point, and this was in 2022, and I had started, after the pandemic, I had started a new job. And I went back to work. I had worked for Harley Davidson for about 5 or 6 years. And I had friends that went to work at a different dealership. And they had been trying to get me to go there for a while. And at the end of the pandemic, I finally gave in and went there. And so it was during that time when I was there, I was struggling. I was struggling with it, and I knew I was having these thoughts. Like I was thinking about checking out, and I was having these thoughts, and I was like, I need help, right? So I've got to try to find some help. And I went through our employee assistance program, and they directed me to some resources, and through that I found this therapist, and I started seeing her once a week, and it was while I was seeing her that I formulated this plan. And I knew what I was going to do, and I had this whole plan, and it was just a matter of where, right? Where and when. I knew how, it was where and when. And so it was August 22nd of 2022. I had written all the letters to everyone that I thought I needed to explain anything to, and I owned several firearms, right? My family has always had firearms, right? So I have one that it's 9mm, it's semi-automatic, it will fire without the magazine in it, because I'm thinking this thing through, right? And I can't believe I'm even telling you all of this. I didn't want someone to come along and find that weapon, and be able to use it if it was a kid or something like that. So I'm thinking, I can load this with a single round, and I know that that's enough to do the job, right? So I got on my motorcycle. I drove about 2.5 hours from home up into New Hampshire, up on Route 113 to a place called Evans Notch. It's super, super isolated. It's literally the middle of fucking nowhere. And I had been there before. It's a place that we used to go. We'd ride our bikes up there, and we'd stop and hang out, and there's a river, and it's really a really cool place. And so that's where I was going. I was going there, and that's what I was doing. So I parked. Want me to get to the whole thing?
Yeah.
Okay, so I parked my bike.
Cliff notes, though, just so I can get to more, because there's so much.
I parked the bike, I locked it up, and I went down by the river, and I sat there for a while. I took a couple pictures, and my phone was like, no service, right? It literally says no service at the top. I don't know. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's no service. I'm like, oh, shit. And I was trying to get on Facebook and load the pictures, like, I was like, it's no fucking service. Not going to work. So I had a bunch of letters, and I had Ziploc bagged them so they wouldn't get fucked up. And I had the pistol on my lap, and I had my phone and these letters on my other side, and I was sitting on this flat rock, and I was looking around. It was pretty freaking beautiful. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'm done. And I was ready to do that, and I was ready to just eat around. And it's fucked up. My phone goes off. The text alert goes off, and I got a text message. So I look down at the screen, and I got the preview. And the preview is from my buddy John, who nicknamed Hawkeye. And it says, hey, what are you doing? Which was pretty typical of him to write that. But I looked at that, and I saw that, and I was like, I took it in a whole nother way. Like, hey, what am I doing? And I sat there for a little bit and I just thought, okay, well, I gotta fucking go home because I left some stuff at home and I don't want anyone to find that and think that I fucking blew my head off out here in the woods. Because I didn't do it. I didn't do it. But that was kind of really where it changed, right? And on that ride home, it changed. And so when I got back, I started looking. I had talked to a friend of mine who told me about EMDR, and so I found somewhere to go to do that. And even though I was still in therapy, and I did eventually tell her what I had done. I didn't tell her right away because I was afraid she was going to have me locked up.
Right. Yeah, you're like, I don't want to go to the insane asylum.
Right. Because I'm really not. I'm just like a guy with a freaking shitload of stuff going on. So the EMDR, it was the first time that I got this immediate. It was like almost immediate relief from this whole thing.
And for people who don't know what EDMR is,
it's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, and it's a therapy modality for post-traumatic stress disorder that is hinged originally was based with eye movement, bilateral eye movement. So they would, the therapist or the clinician would they would have you focus internally and focus on that traumatic memory and those feelings that you have. And then there's more to it than that, but to simplify it, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And while you're holding that feeling, focus on the hand, or they'd use a light that went back and forth, right, with your eyes. So your eyes are crossing back and forth. And everyone has kind of a different rhythm, different speed and different rhythm. And it would help process those unprocessed memories or that unprocessed energy and those feelings.
Fascinating.
And so
immediate relief with this? I mean, it was like
more than anything else.
Wow.
It wasn't like magic, right? And we tell people that all the time. It's not magic. But if this is something that's going to work for you, it's going to work pretty quickly, and you're going to know. And it worked pretty quickly.
Medication, and you're not having to depression and
So through that whole experience, I decided that, you know what, I need to find out, how do I get to do this? How can I learn how to do that? Right? And so I found a place called the Embody Lab, and they offer a class like I think it's once a year they do it, but it's a whole group of people, and I don't know and I'm not plugging anybody's book or anything, but there's a book. It's called The Body Keeps the Score, and the guy that wrote it is Bessel van der Kolk. He's a doctor, and it's an older book, and he's an older guy, and it's kind of almost like the book about this stuff, right? And so he was one of the instructors. And I was like, that's where I want to learn. Those are the people I want to learn from, right? So then there's all these leading people in the industry teaching this class. And I'm like, yeah, I want to. So it doesn't even matter. Whatever the cost is, I want to do this. And so it was virtual by Zoom. And it was like 3 or 4 months. I think we did it for 3 or 4 months, but it was international. There's 800 people worldwide taking this course. And so it was amazing. even more so in the way that you get to interact with these people that are so good at this craft, that was even more healing for me, right? Because you practice with one another. But like you learn, so I learned how to do it. I became certified. I guess that's the piece that's missing, right?
Yeah.
So the piece that's missing is I became certified in Somatic EMDR, and part of that process
Healed you as well, huh?
is that it heals you in the process as well. You know what I mean? So now I've come to this place where I have this experience that I've not ever been able to find anyone else that's had that same thing or similar. I mean, I talk to firefighters a lot and ask because they go to car accidents, right? So you work basically in the community you live in. You go to an auto accident or something, and you never know. It could be a family member. It could be somebody. You know what I mean? So, and I've not ever really
that. Right. They think first on the scene is going to be an ambulance, but usually it's a firefighter. They are, or the police and firefighters. They're the first ones to show up.
It's usually police and fire before ambulance.
Right.
Right.
They assess, but
yeah.
So they are seeing, like you said, and if it's local, they're seeing people they know more than likely. So
Right.
I have friends that are police officers that have literally seen brains exploded, people stuck in like big rig tires. Like they see a lot of horrific stuff.
yeah. And so it sounds like
They
what
do.
you're doing, working with this more homeopathic approach to help and to offer another tool, you can do so much great work with first responders. And I'm sure you're already doing that.
I'm trying. I did speak to a group of about 50 of them once. And this is post being in Anthony's speaking class,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I spoke to a group of about 50 of them, and they all looked at me and had that same horrific look on their face, like, can't fucking believe that happened to you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, it
But
did.
it happens. It probably happens with first responders,
I'm sure it happens. I just have never met anybody else.
Oh,
But
I
it's
see
not,
what you're saying.
it's not the incident itself to me, because you're going to have the same problems, even if it isn't somebody you know. If you don't address things, right away. Like you may think, like, look at, I don't know, what's a scenario? Like you go to a house fire or something, and you're a firefighter, and there's a young kid inside, and the kid doesn't make it, and you pull that kid out, and you're stuck with that, and you may think you're okay with it, but I promise you, you're not. You're not. You need to talk to somebody. You need to see somebody about that, and the sooner you do it, the better off you are. So for me, it was this 25 years, right? And so we have this whole thing Wednesday night with Anthony.
Yeah.
I've got to talk 15 minutes, right? And part of that, I think I'm going to talk about time, right? And I'm going to say, picture the beginning of your life and then fast forward to the last day of your life. And what's that time frame, right? So let's say it's 80 years, right? We hope it's more, but let's say it's 80. Now go to the middle and pluck 20 years out. And that's the 20 years you wasted not addressing the post-traumatic stress that's obvious. It's obvious to someone. It may not be that obvious to you, but it's obviously there, right? And for me, it was obviously there. And it was obvious to other people as well. But you think that you can do this, right? Because you think that this is, like, for me, that memory rolling in my head, honestly, I just thought that was my memory of it. But it wasn't, right?
Is it your brain saying, this needs attention, this needs attention, this needs it? Like every day saying, address
Right.
it, address it, address
It's
it.
like the fire alarm is going off. Like
Yeah.
that fire alarm is going off. Dude, address this because this is getting worse. And then ultimately, where did it lead me? It led me to sitting on a riverbank with a pistol ready to blow my freaking head off.
Yeah.
Like, and completely at peace with that decision, which is the scary part. Like, I was completely okay with that decision because it was going to make this shit stop.
Yeah. And I think what's happening too, I'm going to connect you with a first responder she wants to offer healing, and she's starting a program with first responders specifically because I think there's a fear that if they start seeking help, it becomes part of their record and it starts affecting finances. It starts affecting their job. Now they have a record of everything. And so she wants to make this secondary platform where police officers and firefighters, EMTs can go to and seek help without being penalized on the other side of it. So I'm going to connect you guys because she has a podcast too, and I think you would do really well on her platform. I think
That would be awesome.
You guys could
That
do
would
some
be
really
awesome.
great stuff. But I want to. Do you have questions before I want to kind of open it up to you to kind of dive into some stuff. So when I want to go to the mindset, if you can, because I think there are a lot of people who battle those thoughts in their minds.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't get the opportunity to say, oh, I made it on the other side of the trigger. I made it.
They don't.
And I could talk about it. And even families who probably have loved ones that they have lost and they think of the what if. I mean, you're the living testament of the what if. You did it. You came out the other side. So kind of walk me through, if you can, briefly on the mindset, what that was like for you and how you felt on the other side of it. Was there relief? Was there regret? What came for you?
There was all of the above, right? So there was relief. I was relieved that I didn't do that. I was concerned that because I didn't do it, then was I going to revisit that in a week or a month?
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
There was guilt because I felt like I was about to do something that was going to just absolutely crush the people in my life that loved me. Mm-hmm. And literally, my mom and dad, they're still with me, right? They lost one son, and could you imagine them having to lose another?
Sure, yeah.
Basically, because of the same incident, really, it's all connected. That would all have been connected, right? So guilt over that, over actually, I was making that decision to do that to them, and my brother too. So my brother Dave would have been devastated by that.
Was the pain just too hard to bear? Was it enough to say, I'm willing to leave them with this pain because the pain I'm facing right now is just too strong to deal with or to live with? Is that even a thought that goes through the mind?
It wasn't even, I knew that I was going to hurt them, but I never thought about the level of hurt that was going to be, right? Like what that hurt was going to be for them. And all I really knew was that I needed for this to stop, and it didn't, and nothing else would stop it, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I was never really a drinker or anything, right? So I never really drank a lot, but I got in this relationship, and I was in this relationship for almost 8 years. And we drank almost every night. Right? And so I drank almost every night on a regular basis. I mean, I didn't get drunk.
COVID time. Everybody drank every night too.
Right? Didn't get drunk stupid, but I mean, but I wasn't drinking it started with a couple of beers and then it went to a few shots, right? So I'd do a few shots. I skipped the beers because I thought, the beers would make me full.
Yeah. Full and fat.
I'll do a couple shots of tequila and I'll be good, right?
Yeah.
And so that was that whole thing. But and I could have easily done all that, but that was kind of out of character for me.
Yeah, sure.
And so that also was that downward spiral. I had also gained, I was almost, I tell people I was 265.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
And so in the 2 years after my incident on the riverbank, right?
Mm-hmm.
I went all the way down to 198.
It's amazing the weight,
Right.
the physical, and you were probably working out a ton and then went to not, once you dip in that physical realm, it does something to the mental state as well, which David
does.
could probably chime in some stuff on that.
So
So you guys, whatever happened to the letters? Did you burn them? Did you give them to people? Do you still have them? Did you ever read them?
I still have them. They're sealed. I thought about this. I actually was thinking about this last week. What am I going to do with those?
Yeah, we got to put it in your speech.
Yeah, I can put that in the speech, but I'm not going to put the content in the speech.
Yeah. I mean, it's yours. It was your
Content. Like, I haven't opened them since I sealed them.
fair.
And I don't want to really, because I kind of don't want to take a look into that space
Yeah.
again. Like, I've moved past that. Like, just the fact that I can sit here and talk about this
Yeah, it's huge.
and still feel, okay, I'm not triggered. I'm not activated. I'm not flipping out. I don't feel like I want to crawl out of my skin. I'm okay with talking about it. I was never okay with it. I was never okay with talking about it. And now I am. I'm like, and it's amazing. That alone is amazing
Yeah, really.
to me.
Can we celebrate it? It's
Yeah,
a
we can.
huge accomplishment, Jay, because and I'm sure you probably feel like the work is never going to be done, but the amount of work that you've put in from your story 2021, that's only 3 years ago, you
Right.
fast tracked. I really want to honor you for that.
But I totally focused. I totally stayed focused on it. You know what I mean? I stayed focused on getting better. I stayed focused on my physical health. I stayed focused on improving my mental health every day. I stayed focused on eating the right things and doing all those things, right? And even though I did all those things, I still got laid off from my damn job in June.
I know,
Right?
because your path isn't done yet. There's still stuff
Right.
to uncover.
So- But what's really funny is that now that I'm in this space and I'm talking about this, there's more people being drawn to me that want to talk about these things, and it's kind of amazing. It really is kind of amazing. It's just people are amazing sometimes.
Well, you're an anomaly. You made it on the other side. Like, you don't hear a lot of success stories. You are little, and not to put pressure on you.
You know the part about all this that really kind of still sucks. My friend John that sent the text message. We talked about it, and John was real quick. He was a police officer. We went to high school together. We were like great friends. He was a police officer. His dad was a police officer. He was in a motorcycle accident on the job. Ended up breaking his back and having like 15 surgeries on his back. He was medically retired. We're the same age. And he struggled with a lot of stuff because of that. And we ended up talking, and I told him, we talked about it. Right. And we were like brothers. We were really like brothers. And that was in August. In February, I was going to Florida. That was February of 23. And I asked him if he wanted to go. And his mom had just passed away. And he said, I can't, I got to stay. I got to figure out what I'm doing with the house and all her stuff. And my sister's busting my balls and all this. I'm like, all right. So when I get back, let's go have breakfast. Because we would go have coffee and breakfast like once a week. And I got back from Florida, and the day after I got back, I was on my way to work in the morning. It was like 6:30 in the morning, and my phone's ringing. And it's another mutual friend, someone that I went to high school with. And I'm like, this person has never called me at fucking 6:30 in the morning. This isn't going to be a good phone. Yeah. I'm like, this isn't going to be a good phone call.
Yeah.
And he had a massive heart attack and died in the house. And they found him. He was alone, and they found him, and he was gone.
That's terrible.
You know, so he was a really great friend. And honestly, you know, call it whatever you want. I've had people say you had no cellular service and you still got this text message through. It's like a divine intervention. It's like God was saying that you're not done. But it was John that saved my life. Literally.
Yeah.
Because if I never got that text message, I wouldn't be here talking to you.
Right. I'm so glad you
Right.
sent me that text.
None of you guys would ever have known who I was.
Yeah.
Right. So that was kind of a big loss, but I'm good with it. He's all right. He's in a better place, you know.
Yeah. He was your hero. It's beautiful.
He was. So that's where I'm at. You know what I mean? So my goal is to try to just help as many people that I can. Like, and even if just telling my story and putting that story out there helps one single person to either do something to get help that they desperately need, or to not do something permanent because it's something that is clearly not permanent. You know, it's temporary.
Yeah.
And it can go on for years. Look, 25 years, right? 25 years. I struggled with that for 25 years, and I don't struggle with it anymore. So yeah, there's light at the end of that tunnel. There's hope on the other side of that.
Yeah.
So don't make that permanent decision based off something that's temporary.
And if people want to work with you or if they want to reach out to you, are you opening up yourself to help people who are in similar situations? Are you, what are you doing now as a resource? So we can leave that here for people to get in touch.
They can get in touch with me. You can find me on my website. It's unbreakablecoach.com. And you can find me right there.
Okay.
Yeah, there's all the contact information, everything's right there to get a hold of me.
I love it. And you're taking on clients for the EDMR? Am I saying that correctly?
Everyone says that. That's so weird. It's EMDR.
EMDR. Why do I have EDM?
Electric dance music.
Electric dance therapy.
That's what you said. Yeah, okay, that's cool. If that works, right?
EDM is a type of music, so EDM is why.
It is, right? Isn't that? It's a type of music, right?
Yeah,
it's like
electric dance music.
House music or whatever that electronic.
Yeah, it's all the club people.
So what is it? EMDR?
EMDR, eye movement.
Are you coaching with this EMDR?
Yeah, so what I'm doing is I'm doing what I feel worked for me. So I'm integrating the Somatic EMDR with fitness and nutrition.
Awesome.
Right? Because it's all connected. Like the whole mind body thing is all connected. And so we know that if you have trauma demands two things: to be acknowledged and to be processed. And if you don't do either of those things, it gets stuck. It's literally gets stuck. So we all have those things that trigger us, right? Those memories, those thoughts that have this emotional charge. That emotional charge is a trauma response, right? So that's a trauma response. So anytime you have fight or flight, what you have is a discharge of epinephrine and cortisol into the system, right? And so because everything is energy, that gets stuck in your nervous system. And it has this emotional charge that's connected to this memory or this thought. Somatic EMDR helps process that through, right? It helps release that energy and that. And it creates more space within you to hold those memories without having to attach an emotion to it.
So cool. And it's cool that there's an option out there for people that's not a pill. And I really appreciate you taking time to get on here and to explain
100%.
and to share your story. And I honor you, and I have so much respect for you, and you're going to inspire so many people. And I'm just grateful we get to be a part of your story now and to help share it.
I'm flattered and I'm honored that you guys chose to have me
Yeah.
come talk. I mean, that's
We'll have to do an
amazing.
update as you get going.
I've been listening to your podcast too. So there's like 3 or 4 that I listen to, and you guys have become one of them.
Hey, I'm so glad. Well, you're part of it now. You're part of this whole journey.
I'll put you right up there with the. So can I mention the other ones, or is that?
It doesn't matter to us.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
What do you listen to?
So I listen to Megyn Kelly, right?
Oh, yeah, I like her too.
But I listen to Sean Ryan, the Sean Ryan Show,
Awesome.
and I've been listening. And so it's Sean Ryan I've been listening to since he started doing it.
I just introduced Steph to the Sean Ryan content. The first one was the Joe Rogan podcast with him on there.
Yeah, he's good. I like
Yeah.
him. Yeah.
So he's kind of amazing, and he also has an amazing story as well. And his story with aside from I wasn't a Navy SEAL or a CIA contractor like him, right? Right? But we have struggled with some of the same demons
Yeah.
and come out of the other side of that. And so that I think that was what really kind of drew me to him. And the other thing is we have a mutual friend, and my friend worked in the same business as him, still does actually. So we're not going to mention his name, but so he told me, yeah, you got to listen to this guy, Sean Ryan. He's incredible. So I found him online, and then I started listening to him. And I've been listening.
Good.
It's amazing.
He's a good one. We'll have to tap into him a little bit more.
Yeah, he has really good guests. He took off. He's doing amazing.
Dude, he had Tulsi Gabbard, he had Trump, he had JD Vance. I mean, he's like had all these people. I'm like,
Picking up the big dogs now.
he really is. He's like
Yeah, he's fun.
It's amazing.
hitting it hard.
Yeah.
He's also like doing all these other. He does all these like UAP, and he gets into all the. I was listening to him this afternoon, right? And he was talking to a priest about exorcisms.
Oh, cool.
And I'm going, he's like touching on every single subject that you could possibly imagine. And the content is great. So I'm like, okay.
Yeah. And he's
Cool.
helping people, and he's giving a platform to people. And he does great stuff. Yeah.
He does.
Well-
You guys do as well.
Well, thank
You
you.
guys do too.
Thank you,
Pretty
Jay.
amazing.
We appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I look forward to seeing you on a couple Wednesdays. We're going to chat some more. Stay on after. We're going to wrap up, and then just stay on with the video chat with me on Riverside for just a minute.
Okay.
Don't mind. Anything
No
else
worries.
for
That's it.
Mr.
Appreciate it. Thank you for telling your story. You're going to help a lot of people. And,
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank
on
you
those
for
dark
having me.
places.
Thanks.
Of course.
Thanks for helping spread that
Of
word.
course. We appreciate you. We love you. Thank you. We'll see you guys
Yeah, I
next
love you
time.
guys too, man. Yeah, peace out.